I want to make something crystal clear before I move forward with this video. Everybody is allowed to have opinions. Everybody is allowed to voice those opinions, but they have to make sure that they are weighing the consequences of their own words and understanding what kind of impact they're going to have. And I don't think that's happening. I don't think it's happening at the scale that it should. I don't think it's being called out the way that it should. And I think it's had a detrimental effect on the relationship between the customer and the game developers. Deep-rooted narcissism and a lack of consequences. That's ultimately what the problem here is. And I've been looking at a lot of the discourse over the past couple of weeks and some of the tragedies that have happened. And for me, and I think for a lot of people as well, it's not even a partisan issue as much as it is a problem or an issue with professionalism and general morals. You have game developers flying the flag of their company in their social media bios, running around using the influence that's been afforded to them by those same employers, going around promoting and celebrating the loss of life of their political opposition. That's unacceptable. They're doing it without any care to the risks it's going to bring to not only their games, but their coworkers and their studio. All for some upvotes on an edgy comment for Blue Sky. You are the product. That is the saying in the entertainment industry, whether that's social media, video games, movies, television, or whatever else. Anytime that you open your mouth, every time you think that you have something worth saying, realize that you're always going to risk alienating your audience. And from my perspective, at least with this hobby, I don't think that anything here is supposed to represent alienation. So here I am a year later, giving the same talk, the same sobering lesson on business ethics, on professional ethics, on communication. Because for whatever reason, the video game industry doesn't know when to shut its own mouth because, well, they think that their opinions matter more than their coworkers and their customers. I think it's a rather milquetoast take for me to come out and say that I think that society and entertainment have become increasingly more political. I think it's obvious at this point. It's hard to deny it, and it's to the point where you can't even escape it, even though that's exactly what most of us are setting out to do. I can't open a single app, game, TV show, or movie without having somebody trying to preach their politics to me. And the spaces that we used to have that used to be safe from it largely don't even exist anymore. And I think that's created this new kind of social divide in consumer products and media, where customers were once basing their purchasing habits off of practicality, quality, and enjoyment. Well, now this new category has forced its way into the equation, politics, and it's just complicating things further. I mean, it makes sense. Politics are deeply rooted in personal values and beliefs. They shape the way that we see the world and how we want to see the world. And I think in most cases, especially when it comes to entertainment, people do not want to engage with something that directly conflicts with their beliefs or worse, outright demonizes them. That's why I've always advocated for less politics in entertainment, because I think it risks alienating audiences and escalating division. It's the reason why I steer clear of those conversations myself. I have my own personal politics, of course, but I'm not interested or passionate enough to bring them here. I'm not informed or confident enough to speak on them with any level of authority that would be worth dividing my community over something that largely does not matter for the service that I provide. When I criticize some of these studios for forcing politics into their games, it's not because I secretly hold some kind of agenda. It's just because I believe that they just don't belong there. Players come from every background imaginable, different beliefs, values, experiences, and different walks of life entirely, different countries entirely, and they don't need me or game developers telling them how to think. What they actually need is for people like me to respect their time and for developers to respect their experience. But while I see all of this as unnecessary, it seems like developers believe otherwise. It feels like anytime there's a major controversy or tragedy, both game developers and games media feel compelled to voice their opinions. They use the platforms and recognition afforded to them by their employers or by the games that they worked on to broadcast those opinions to their audience and to their peers. And what I find to be the most disgusting and reckless misuse of that platform, Sucker Punch Studios' Drew Harris, a senior developer of Ghost of Yotai, came forward on Blue Sky to seemingly celebrate and make light of the brutal end met by political influencer Charlie Kirk. This was first discovered and reported on by gaming content creator Legacy Killa HD. Following the news of Kirk's passing, Drew posted on Blue Sky saying that I hope the shooter's name is Mario so that Luigi knows his bro got his back. A post that was liked multiple times by developers from the Coalition, Bungie, and a few others. As things unfolded, more developers were found weighing in. A localizer from Final Fantasy XIV was caught reposting a call for a purge. A witch hunt then ensued, and suddenly more players and commentators were paying closer attention to the words of developers. Once Drew's post made it over to Twitter, with people sharing his comments directly to his employer, others sharing posts about canceling their pre-orders, and instead of backing down, Drew instead doubled down, mocking the situation entirely with posts like, "I have been told that Twitter has noticed me from across the room, ooh woo. Some of y'all never have heard the critically acclaimed Mario Brothers franchise by Nintendo, and it shows. And maybe instead of emailing people's employers, y'all should be emailing your reps and demanding gun control immediately." I don't even know what to say. I am stunned by the lack of self-awareness and care here. Not only are you representing your company, not only is your game already being dragged into the conversation with your employer being tagged in these posts, but then you just go and double down with more edgy posting and doing it using a competitor's brand. I honestly wonder how Nintendo feels about one of Sony's employees running around using the name of their company, their characters, and one of their most iconic franchises to make jokes about the death of a political influencer. Oh, wait, never mind. I do know. You lost your job. Look, I don't know anything about Charlie Kirk. I don't watch that kind of content. I don't follow the political sphere, and I don't have anything to add to the debate between people's love or hate for the guy. But what I will say is this: it is wholly unacceptable to condone, celebrate, or promote this kind of extreme violence. While I will say that I largely stay uninvolved in these political matters, usually on the side of just on the outside looking in, what I have seen over the last decade online is more and more communities that are normalizing it. Social media that is just fueling pockets of people that are escalating and celebrating violent rhetoric. Deeply insecure and disturbed groups of people that are just gassing each other up, egging people on to ruin their lives and the lives of others just so they can have somebody else to point to and say, "At least I'm not them." From my perspective, gaming should never be that space. Game developers should not allow it to turn into that kind of space. If anything, this industry should be doing the exact opposite, toning rhetoric down, lowering the temperature, and recognizing the risk of what happens if this keeps escalating. Especially now, we are walking into unknown territory after such a horrific event. After seeing the post from game developers speaking up, I put my own thoughts on Twitter and I wrote, "I don't think that they realize how much this damages their brand, puts their coworkers at risk, and alienates their audiences. Likely they don't care. I doubt anything will happen, like with Avowed and Obsidian. When their devs ego tripped, nothing happened because the studio shared the same values." Luckily, something did happen in this case. Sony's been a little bit more proactive, probably because of the fact that they've had some recent failures. However, the second incident that I was referring to happened just before the release of Avowed. During the previews for the game, some people on social media were pointing out how the game was using pronouns, with Elon Musk criticizing it, and instead of just letting the game speak for itself, Obsidian's art director Matt Hansen jumped in, openly celebrating the controversy as he posted, "I wanted to make him mad with my game, and I can't believe it actually happened," and then, in the same breath, promoted the game. That move only poured fuel on the fire. Outrage grew. People started digging up older, deleted posts about Obsidian's hiring practices, and for what? To me, it looked like somebody that was just letting their ego take the wheel and using their game as a platform to be able to divide their customers and push their personal politics. Xbox and Obsidian did nothing about it, and while you can agree with me or not, but I think that alienating your audience like that, they set their own game up for failure. Avowed peaked at just 19,000 players on Steam before sliding into obscurity a week later. I don't think these developers understand the impact of their words in a world that is more divisive, political, and connected than ever, in an economy that's more difficult than ever, in a games industry where performance and quality are becoming increasingly more hit or miss. When you go out and you take these unnecessary risks that are rooted in your own ego, it's coming at the cost of your studio's reputation, your coworkers' future, and, well, the success of your game. Again, I want to be clear. It's not that you can't have opinions. It's not that you can't not like a political figure. It's just that you cannot be doing this on a platform that is afforded to you by your employer. I'll be real with you guys. When I see somebody that's posting that stuff that proudly and they're doing it so confidently, it likely tells me that they believe there's going to be no consequences for their actions, because they likely do have coworkers that share the same views. We already know that's the case because we saw there was multiple people from the studio that had liked that post and shared that post that they had made. And that doesn't matter. Even if you have the support of your studio, your game's not even out yet. Why would you? All you've effectively done is just put your coworkers' lives at risk, their livelihood, and their security. Look at the temperature of society right now. Look at the economy. Why would you go and poke the bear? It is so reckless and it's so selfish. These developers don't understand that first impressions are oftentimes last impressions, and their words carry a lot farther than they think they do. I think that's obvious by now. And when your game isn't even out yet, and this is the first time this game has gone viral since I remember it even being announced. And the only marketing material that I remember for it was Summer Games Fest, at least recently, I think. They've already been overshadowed by all these multi-platform releases. Keep in mind, this game is going to be locked to PlayStation, at least initially. And every single game developer in the industry wants to release their game in September and October. This is going to stop a studio in its tracks. It could very well stop a studio in its tracks. Who's to say this doesn't affect sales? Who's to say this doesn't result in layoffs? Hope it was worth it. Now I'll caveat and say that Sucker Punch is a studio of like 250 developers, likely more developers because they're getting close or they're just about to release Ghost of Yotai. And the opinion of one developer does not define the entire studio, and nor does it define whatever the final product is actually going to look like once it's actually released into the wild. But I don't really think that matters that much, because when that game comes out, because of how recent it is, people are going to remember the developer that was doubling down. People are going to look at Jin Sakai and see how it switched to a female lead and be like, ooh. Even though, yes, I know his story is over. Believe me, I'm actually with people on that one. I totally understand that. They're also going to look and see that the voice actress for the main character is also very outspoken online. And they're going to start connecting the dots. They're going to start seeing all the red flags, and they're going to say, yeah, you know what? Nope, not buying it. And honestly, I can't blame them. Not at all. You cannot afford to draw political battle lines on consumer products. They shouldn't even be there in the first place. And devs are probably looking at this entire situation. There's probably even people that are watching this video right now that are like, well, this is just venting. It's just edgy posting online. This is all cancel culture, people getting all mad about it. But I think that customers have noticed, especially with just the shift that we've seen in media over the past couple of years, that this looks like misplaced priorities more than anything else. It shows that we're not the priority in the conversation because they don't care what we think of what they have to say. And in a lot of cases, for a lot of people, they think that those opinions are ultimately going to bleed into the game itself. And for the people that believe that, they're not wrong. You know, recently I made a video on Bungie, and in it I talked about how their original philosophy was simple, that they were their customers. They built games that they themselves wanted to play, and that perspective kept them grounded. But as the years went on, that started to shift, and it shifted towards money, towards greed, and in losing that perspective, they also then lost sight of what their players actually wanted and needed. And I think that that same problem is basically spread across the entire industry. In fact, I would actually argue that it's just entertainment as a whole now. They just don't see themselves and their customers anymore. Developers today, well, they think of their audience not as people like them, but instead as this like parasocial caricature of a customer, not someone who shares their same taste, but as somebody that wants to be taught by them, this imagined audience that wants to have their minds changed, or worse, the idealized version of who they wish their audience would be. But the truth is, customers in the real world are messy. We are a chaotic mix of beliefs, lifestyles, backgrounds, values, and principles. We do not think as a monolith, and we never will. And the irony is, none of that actually matters as long as you're just doing your job. As long as your job is just to make games. And if your objective is to create something fun, compelling, or interesting, well, you don't really need to worry about who your customer is. You don't have to worry about trying to reshape their worldview. All you need to do is just make a game worth playing. And the moment that you lose sight of that perspective, the moment that you start thinking of your players as something to correct or fix, is the moment that you've already broken that relationship. I think the industry underestimates how influential social media has become in shaping the way that these games are received. Developers might not see it that way because they're living in these insulated worlds where most of their peers are sharing their same values, but customers don't live in that same bubble. They see somebody on social media with the studio's name in their bio mocking, promoting, or celebrating something horrific, and they connect the dots immediately. They don't think to themselves, oh, this is that person's opinion. They think of that as the studio's opinion, as the game's opinion. And I don't think that they understand that yet. And honestly, I don't think that the players are wrong to think that. Games are collaborative works. Studios often hire people who are culturally aligned with the studio. And if one developer is loud enough and confident enough to openly risk the studio's reputation online, it's a safe assumption to say that leadership either tolerates it or quietly agrees. Those values and those beliefs are ultimately going to make their way into the games. And by the way, this isn't a conversation about social politics. This is just about how games are made. And I think players are starting to pick up on that. When priorities are misaligned, when developers are valuing their own personal opinions over a player's experience, the result is just this lower quality and preachy game that people do not want to play. Video games aren't just collaborative works, they're creative works, shaped heavily by the beliefs and values of the people that are making them. We've heard studios talk endlessly about wanting to broaden their audience, but the more extreme and uniform some of these studios' internal cultures are becoming, it's the more likely that their games are going to narrow their audience instead of expanding it. We saw that with Dragon Age the Veilguard. Its themes, narrative, and gameplay failed to resonate, and because of that, players didn't just ignore the game. A lot of players actively went after it online because they felt betrayed. And once that shift happens, once players stop seeing the identity of a game as something that they're sharing between the developers and themselves, and instead start seeing it as a mouthpiece for a studio's values that don't include them, the relationship is over. That's why this backlash has been getting so visceral lately. It's not just disappointment with the product, it's a sense that they're being pushed out of something that they once cared about. Audiences that felt like they were collaborators in this creative journey with these developers suddenly feel like they're just the target of a message that they never asked for. I think one of the most dangerous forces in the industry right now is an audience that is turning against a game. People are just assuming it's bad PR or negative reviews, but it's far more corrosive than that. When players feel excluded, dismissed, or betrayed, they're not just walking away. These guys are pushing back. They're amplifying every single controversy, highlighting every flaw, and making sure that the wider audience never forgets the worst things that are associated with your studio. And once that perception takes hold, it doesn't matter how much money you dump into your marketing, that game is radioactive. We've seen this play out clearly with Concord and Avowed. In both cases, players didn't just shrug their shoulders and move on. They actively rooted for failure. For Concord, the perception was that it wasn't just simply looking generic. It was that Sony was wasting their time and resources trying to chase something that nobody wanted. By the time that game actually launched, it already had an audience that was determined to tear it down. With Avowed, it wasn't just the visuals or mechanics that tanked its interest. It was the arrogance of its developers and the massive identity shift of that game from what it was promised and what was actually delivered. The thing I think developers don't seem to understand is that the strongest backlash is coming from Betrayal and Alienation. It comes from the players that once cared, the people who believed in a franchise or in a trusted studio. It's also coming from potential customers who looked at a game's design and feel like it was never meant for them. In both cases, the message is still clear. This isn't for you anymore. And the irony is, backlash born from Betrayal is almost always going to drown out support. A fan might recommend a game to their friends, but a disappointed player, they will make sure everybody knows why they feel let down, posting, sharing, and amplifying their frustrations to make sure that they change the perception around a game. That reaction is not coming out of nowhere. It's coming from people that feel dismissed or disrespected. And whether developers want to admit it or not, that's on them. If you present yourself as the face of a studio and you spend your time online mocking or alienating customers, you should not be surprised when those very same customers turn their frustration into a movement against you. That's the climate AAA developers are working in right now, and fair or not, it's just the reality of the situation. Making a fun game, that's just the foundation, but if your audience doesn't feel respected, they do not care how fun your game is. And the more developers that are out there that are confusing speaking as an individual with speaking as a representative of their company or of their game, well, they're just going to create more players who would rather see their entire project crash and burn than ever give it a chance. The reason I'm making this video and why I wanted to talk about this is because I don't like the direction that conversation and gaming is headed in right now. And it's because this hobby has always represented togetherness for me. This is how I met a lot of friends. It's how some of my friends have met friends and spouses and things like that. And it's always represented sharing your favorite games and memories and whatever else, interests. It's finding commonalities between people. This is like the best place to be able to do that. And while there's always going to be some rivalries and outliers, I feel like there's just this culture rot that's extending from the industry itself and likely from their own developers. And it's just making this hobby not represent what it used to represent, at least not for me. One of the things that I've been doing in the background is I've been doing some side research. I've been trying to figure out what the next gaming trend is going to be. Okay? Just put it out there. And essentially, I want to figure out what the next Fortnite or whatever that next thing is going to be. And I've been paying attention to a lot of communities and doing some background research. And the funny thing is that it's already happened. But for whatever reason, nobody's really talking about it or its social impacts. And it's the fact that there's a lot of people that are moving away from competitive environments and they're moving towards cooperative ones. Helldivers popped off. I think that was one of the first signal flares that I saw. Then after that, we saw Pal World. Then we saw Schedule One and Repo and Peak and these friend slot games that have now started to take over as well. And I think the reason why is because people are looking for togetherness. They're looking for a sense of community, and you really can't find that in a lot of other spheres, not in the same way. Maybe it's me being sappy or philosophical, but I think the reason why is because people are looking for the meaning of playing video games again. And what I mean by that is entertainment and friendship. That's what this entire thing used to be. I think that these companies have a responsibility to their customers and also society at large to root out whatever this culture rot is and where it's extending from. Maybe it's leadership, whatever it might be. They just need to figure it out. And they need to be more proactive about it rather than reactive. I think that I'm happy that Sony took a step forward by getting rid of the person, But that was a reactive step because they likely have hundreds of millions of dollars sunk into Ghost of Yotei. They have a bunch of other games that have already failed. They definitely don't want another one. I'll tell you that right now. And this is their reaction to it. What I want to see instead is I want to see some of these companies proactively approaching this and figuring out the best way to fix it and making sure that their developers' ideals, their developers' values align with the needs of the customer. If we can get back to that, we can get to a really good place. I don't know what's coming. Society's in a really weird place right now. But all I know is that this hobby is supposed to mean something. This hobby is supposed to be a place where everyone can exist. It's supposed to be a place where everybody can get together, regardless of who you are. Everybody feels like they belong, and it hasn't felt that way. Game developers have gone out of their way to try to say that that's exactly what they're doing, but they've just alienated other people as a result of it. The only way you're going to be able to do that is that you need to be able to mean what you actually say. And in this case, that means that they have to figure out a way to be able to bridge the gap between themselves and the people that they disagree with. That's all I got. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm very tired, so I'm going to go to bed. If you guys did enjoy the video, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment down below, come follow me on Twitch. I'll be live this weekend. Stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye.
Family.